The Lamp is Lit. Leaves from a Journal by Ruskin Bond. Read by Elvis Mathias. Introduction. There is no escaping the forces of nature. When Newton sat beneath an apple tree and an apple fell on his head, he discovered the law of gravity. When I sat beneath an apple tree and a large red Himachali apple fell on my head, I discovered that, far from keeping the doctor away, an apple can give you a headache. So I shifted to another tree, a cherry. Cherries don't hurt unless you eat too many of them. Suffice to say that I like sitting beneath trees. They make me feel younger, and occasionally I can write a poem or a story while enjoying their shade and the gentle flurry of their leaves. A young reader recently wrote to me saying, "I want to be a writer like you, so that I can lie on the grass and do nothing." Lying on the grass and doing nothing is, of course, a wonderful occupation. But I did not survive as a freelance writer for over 40 years simply by lying on the grass and counting ladybirds. If the grass is to mean anything, a time comes when you have to get up, brush the ladybirds from your shirt and trousers, and proceed to your desk to write, type, or word process all those ideas you get while sitting out there doing nothing. During my idle moments, I receive many good thoughts and some that are not so good. But these thoughts have to be translated into intelligible and readable language if they are to convey anything to others. And that's where the hard but pleasurable work comes in. The composing, the revising, the rewriting. The essays and episodes, many taken from my journals, in this collection may give the reader a picture of my life, both as writer and person. In my case, they are one and the same thing. I live through my writing, just as my writing lives through me. This is not autobiography in the fullest sense. In my previous book, Scenes from a Writer's Life, I did trace my development as an individual and as a budding writer through my childhood and teens. But there is an equal amount of autobiography to be found in my fiction. The account of my mother's final illness in the story, The Last Time I Saw Delhi, says more than any factual account that I can give. Sometimes it is easier to tell the truth by disguising it as a fiction, especially when the subject is a painful one. And perhaps my feelings for my father are best expressed in the short story, The Funeral, although the funeral is a purely imaginary one. I was at boarding school in Simla when my father died in Calcutta. The essays and journal entries presented here are factual and, to some extent, revealing, but they have been put together by me largely as a celebration of my survival as a freelance. This survival being as much the result of my stubbornness and persistence as of any talent that I may possess. I have known many talented young writers who gave up too quickly. My early forays into literary magazines are described in the first part of this book, along with some examples of my work at the time. Most people think of me as a small town or hill station person, for that is what I have become. But I did spend 4 years of my life in London, and 5 years, summers included, in New Delhi. But it was only when I came to live in the hills some 30 years ago that I blossomed into the sort of personal nature writer and children's writer described in my largely autobiographical Rain in the Mountains. And I have learned to laugh at myself. When I was younger, I took myself too seriously. Recently someone asked me why I did not write on social issues. Well, I had always thought that man's relationship with the natural world was a social issue, but apparently he was thinking of issues such as caste, class, religious bigotry, the economic uplift of the masses, etc. All important issues, and all dealt with far more effectively by writers who are more gifted in that direction. I was hoping that there was still room in this world for a simple storyteller, one who strives to give pleasure to both child and adult, not by hiding our scars, but by showing that we can be beautiful in spite of them. I find it easier to see God in a raindrop than in a place of worship. My credo, for what it's worth, is given in the last chapter, When the Lamp is Lit. Among writers, I'm not one of the big guns. I'm not even a little gun. I'm just a pebble lying on the beach. But I like to think that I'm a smooth, round, colorful pebble, and that someone will pick me up, derive a little pleasure from holding me, and possibly even put me in his or her pocket. Could you be that wanderer by the sea? I shall nestle there, close to you. I shall try to make you feel better. And if you tire of me, you can always throw me back into the sea. Perhaps a kindly wave will wash me ashore again, and someone else will pick me up. This extract from my journal may be relevant here. It is worth noting that some of the great story writers, like Gorky, were tramps. Stevenson did a lot of tramping before he settled down on his South Sea island. On one of his tramps through Europe, his sole companion was a donkey. They got on famously, and their journey together resulted in a classic travelogue, Travels with a Donkey. Wordsworth, wandering lonely as a cloud, tramped about a good deal, all the while recording nature's bounty. Kalidas's wanderings in the Vindhya mountains gave him his incomparable knowledge of nature's ways, described with such loving exactitude in The Cloud Messenger and his verse dramas. Whitman's Leaves of Grass celebrates America's great open spaces. Conrad tramped the high seas, commanding little tramp steamers, and then held a mirror to the sea in finely crafted novels and romances. These were lonely men, wanderers rather than travelers. In spirit I've always been one of them, although I wander less today than I did as a young man, although I have become a stay-at-home, taken up with family concerns and the necessity to make a decent income. I remain at heart a wanderer, and my heroes are Kim, Huck Finn, and Captain Marlowe. I mention these great literary figures not in order that I might rub shoulders with them. We do that when we read their books, but simply to show that loneliness is a vital part of the artist's creativity. Even today, surrounded by loved ones, I am often conscious of being alone. Every man is an island, no matter how hard he tries to paddle away. A woman may often have the comfort of a child feeding at her breast. Men grow up insecure. You can be amongst people and still be lonely. The loneliest period of my life consisted of the 2 years I spent in Jersey, a real island, where I lived with relatives. They were not unkind to me, but we did not really love each other. I suppose I wasn't very lovable in those days, and I yearned for all that I had left behind in India. Alone, I walked the waterfront, the rain-swept, wind-swept seawall, talking to myself, promising myself that I'd be a published writer some day soon and return to the sensuous, welcoming arms of the land I had left. I was only 17, but out of my loneliness, I produced a novel, raw, naive, and imperfect, but brimming with life and joy and truth, my own truth, for to be true to oneself is to be true to others. Chapter 1. Freelancing. The Early Years. Writing for my life. Money talks, and it's usually saying goodbye. Most of mine had gone in paying for my passage back to India, and when I arrived in my hometown of Dehradun, I had about 800 rupees to show for my 3 years abroad. It didn't help to find that my stepfather was now bankrupt, and that he and my mother were planning to start a new life in Delhi, free of the encumbrance of a non-functioning motor workshop and unmanageable income tax arrears. If they were hoping that I would return from England with my fortune made, they must have been disappointed. That £50 advance from Andre Deutsch for my first book, The Room on the Roof, had melted away, and the book was yet to be published. I'd have to write and sell some short stories and articles, and soon, if I was to survive in the India of 1955. Within a couple of months of my return, my mother and stepfather, school-going brother, and half-brother's handicapped sister, along with my mother's dogs, about 6 of them, had left for Delhi.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?